The Imam replied, "But I say, that it is not strange if a person is saved as he is saved, it is only strange that a person perishes as he perishes, given the scope of God's mercy." The supplicant who responds to the God of the Quran never forgets the wrath of God, but he remains confident that God's essential nature will show itself, in spite of his own weaknesses. Padwick was so struck with the devaluation of human sins that seems to result from this attitude that she displays a rare instance of Christian bias, objecting that it "leads to a certain moral shallowness in some forgiveness-seeking prayers and is unable to attribute any moral cost to God's forgiveness," alluding herein in the rest of the passage to the Christian doctrine of atonement. Among three examples of moral shallowness, she cites the following lines from Imam Zayn al-Abidin, found in al-Sahifat al-Khamisa. "My God, my sins do not harm thee and thy pardon does not impoverish thee. Then forgive me what does not harm thee and give me what thou wilt not miss." In order to understand the attitude expressed here, one needs to put it into its larger context. The specific attitude expressed by the Imam corresponds precisely to the reality of God's infinite mercy and forgiveness as revealed in various Quranic verses. Many passages from the Sahifa present the same point of view. Moreover, when the Imam says, "Thou art the generous Lord for whom the forgiveness of great sins is nothing great," 31.10, or "Pardoning great sin is nothing great for thee, overlooking enormous misdeeds is not difficult for thee, putting up with indecent crimes does not trouble thee." 12.13, he is merely echoing the command of the Prophet mentioned above. The worshipper should be firm and make his desire great, for what God gives is nothing great for him. In any case, the context of these prayers shows that the accompanying moral attitude is hardly shallow, since it demands refraining from arrogance, pulling aside from persistence in sin, and holding fast to praying forgiveness. 12.13. Moral shallowness could only follow if the worshipper remembered God's mercy and forgot his wrath, but both are always kept in view. The Sahifa and Islamic spirituality. In spite of studies that have rejected the idea, many people in the West still believe that true Islam lies in simplicity, austerity, legalism, formalism, and a God perceived as just and transcendent. Hence, those elements of Islamic civilization which demonstrate complexity, subtlety, warmth, love, inwardness, spirituality, and a God of mercy, compassion, and immanence are seen as largely extraneous to or reactions against Quranic Islam. Scholars such as Massignon have pointed out that a person of spiritual sensitivity only needs to read the Quran for such ideas to be dissolved. But few people who have adopted the old stereotypes possess this sort of sensitivity or would be interested in changing their preconceived ideas, lest sympathy be stirred up in their hearts. It is not my aim here to reject, as so many have done before me, these common biases concerning the nature of true Islam, but I would like to point out that a work like the Sahifa brings out an inward dimension of Islam which may be much more difficult to perceive in other early texts. When scholars and other outsiders look at Islam, they naturally perceive what can be seen at first glance, that is, events, written reports and records, social relationships, and so on. It is not easy to look into people's hearts or to investigate their personal relationship with God, nor are most people interested in doing so. If there is a way into hearts, it must come by studying the most inward concerns of individuals as reflected in their outward activities and writings. But those dimensions of Islam which have caught the most attention of outside observers are external and obvious, and they also happen to be relatively devoid of the love and warmth normally associated in the West with spirituality. Islamic civilization as a whole is much like a traditional Muslim city. The outer walls make it appear dull and somber, and it is not easy to gain access to the world behind the walls. But if one becomes intimate with the city's inhabitants, one is shown into delightful courtyards and gardens, full of fragrant flowers, fruit trees, and sparkling fountains. Those who write about Islamic history, political events, and institutions deal with the walls, since they have no way into the gardens. Some of the gardens are opened up through the study of Sufism, art and architecture, poetry, and music, but since all of these have appeared in specific historical forms, influenced by the surrounding environment, their deep Islamic roots can easily be lost to sight. The most traditional and authentic gardens of the city, and the most difficult of access, are the hearts of the greatest representatives of the civilization. It is here that the supplications handed down from the pillars of early Islam can open up a whole new vision of Islam's animating spirit, since they provide direct access to the types of human attitudes that are the prerequisite for a full flowering of the Islamic ideal. Other dimensions. This introduction may seem to be suggesting that the Sahifa deals exclusively with Islamic spirituality. But the Sahifa deals with other domains as well. As was pointed out above, the great representatives of Islam bring together all levels of Islamic teachings, just as these are brought together by the Quran and the Hadith. If spirituality has been emphasized in discussing the Sahifa, this has to do with the fact that the work is a collection of supplications, and these presuppose certain attitudes toward the divine reality, which cannot be understood outside spirituality's context. But the Sahifa also provides teachings that are applicable on many different levels, from the theological, in the broadest sense of the term, to the social. A thorough analysis of these would demand a book far longer than the Sahifa itself. It is hoped that the publication of this translation will encourage scholars to study the content of the prayers contained in the Sahifa as well as the prayers left by other pillars of early Islam, the Shiite Imams in particular, to bring out the whole range of teachings they contain. The most that can be done here is to allude to some of the other important topics touched upon by the Sahifa, and mention a few of the significant questions which these bring up. Islam is an organic reality possessing three basic dimensions. Practice are the Sharia al-Islam faith al-Iman, which includes doctrine and intellectual teachings, and spirituality al-Ihsan. In the lived experience of the community, these dimensions are intimately interrelated, even if various institutional forms tend to deal with them separately. The earliest sources, such as the prophetic hadith or Ali's Naj al-Balagha, deal with all three of these dimensions, though different passages can be isolated which stress one specific epic rather than another. But a work like the Naj al-Balagha converges profoundly from the Sahifa in that it brings together sayings on all sorts of matters, from metaphysics, to the nature of correct government, to the personal flaws of some of Ali